Hi everyone, and welcome to the show. Today we're chatting with Stephen Siciliano, Principal Group Program Manager at Microsoft, to discuss all things Flow. You'll find that this guy has a phenomenal brain on him and is definitely showing us the way forward of the possibilities of Flow. For full show notes, please go to nz365guy.com/60. Now let's get on with the show. Hey Stephen, welcome to the Power 365 show.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. Happy to chat.
Stephen, can you tell me a bit about your life, family, and what you have done when you're kind of not working, or what you do when you're not working?
Sure, yeah. I definitely enjoy being outdoors. I like living in the Pacific Northwest because there's lots of great hiking and running trails and things like that. And I also enjoy traveling. I don't get to travel quite as much as I'd like with work and a bunch of other things going on, but I like seeing new places and checking stuff out.
So your favorite destination to date?
Let's see, of the places I've visited so far, I think Barcelona would probably be one of my favorite places to have visited.
I went there for my honeymoon. I absolutely love the city.
It's a great place.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, the photos and everything that we see around and the chat in the community, you seem pretty young. But you've got this massive amount of wisdom and knowledge and obviously technical skill. How long have you been working inside Microsoft?
So my story is I started at Microsoft actually as an intern back in 2008.
Yep.
So I was at university, and originally for me, I actually wasn't much of a Microsoft fan. My father works in education, so we'd always had Apple computers at home, and I was a big Mac guy, and so I kind of came to Microsoft and did an interview kind of on a whim. But I talked to people here, and heard kind of the passion that people had for making people's lives better, and I actually started on the Office for Mac team. So I kind of used some of my Mac knowledge and got to get into Microsoft that way. So I've been at Microsoft more or less, I guess, coming on 10 years now. Wow. And it's been kind of a long journey. I look pretty young, but I'm almost a 10-year veteran now at Microsoft.
So what was your dream job growing up, and kind of how has that dream evolved?
Well, when I was younger, I wanted to be a scientist, actually. I had, at university, I actually had gotten a degree in physics, and kind of I was staring down the maw of many years of graduate and postgraduate and all those things. And I had spent some time working on open source projects and computer science and those types of things. And I realized that, for my own kind of well-being, I just enjoyed working on building software just a lot more than I did on, the small research projects I had managed to do as an undergrad in physics. So I think at some point I realized that it's really important to work on something that you enjoy doing. So I kind of gave up on discovering the elementary particle or wave and switched to building things that people can actually use. So.
Awesome. So kind of in moving into Microsoft, can you tell me the journey that you went through to ultimately get to the business apps team?
Sure. So originally I was working on Office, like I said, and worked on that for a few years, and then did some searching for other opportunities and ended up actually on the Azure team. Worked on Azure for a little bit, did auto scaling, and ended up working on kind of the first version of Azure Logic Apps. And it's interesting, with Logic Apps, we actually use a lot of the underlying technology that we've built for auto scaling and for alerting as Azure technologies. And we built the Azure Logic Apps product from those kind of underlying pieces and worked on Logic Apps for a couple of years. And then we kind of realized that, hey, this Logic Apps thing, this is awesome for developers to be able to build, these workflows very quickly without writing code. But there's actually a whole audience out there of people who they're not coders, they're not going to Azure every day, and they really could be able to leverage a lot of this workflow capability that's just point and click. It's really easy to use. So we basically from there spun out this Microsoft Flow product that now I'm working on, and I've been with Microsoft Flow basically since we started, and it's been about 3 years now. We started, I think we've kind of first started working on it in November of 2015, and went through our preview was back in April of 2016, and we went to general availability in October of 2016, and been growing it since then.
Wow. So how do you kind of get in the position where you decide that you can see a really a future product line for Microsoft? How does that like, were you in the labs team or something like that, or basically do you have kind of a culture that is always looking for what's next?
Definitely it's the latter. We, at Microsoft, we do have kind of what we call the garage. Well, actually, I don't even know if it's still called that, but back in the day, it was called the garage, and there was a lot of incubation opportunities. But this particular one, it actually kind of started from a hackathon that we did internally, just inside of our organization in Azure. And so, from there, we did in just, I think, under a week, we kind of built out a fully functioning prototype of, when something interesting happens. I honestly don't remember what the trigger was, but it would actually then use Twilio to make a phone call and say, hey, there's an interesting event. I think it may have been from Twitter, actually, that was the trigger. But we went and built that out, and the kind of having that opportunity from just inside of our normal teams and our normal organizations to build out new things and to prototype them and to share them and demo them to other people inside the organization. That's how we've germinated a lot of the things that we've done inside of, at least inside of business applications and Azure, where I've been working for the past few years.
Right. So one of my questions was, when talking about Flow, which came first, Logic Apps or Flow? So obviously Flow is an extension out of Logic Apps. Can you kind of explain the relationship between the two? So, those in the audience, because I've definitely had people ask, what's the difference between Logic Apps and Flow? And yes, there's a different licensing model, but how do you kind of tell that story between the two technologies?
Yeah, it's a great question. The core difference is about who is going to be building these things out. So it's an audience difference. Logic Apps targets developers. It sits alongside all of your other development tools that you have. It's in Azure, in the Azure portal. You can use it in conjunction with your service bus and your storage and event grid and all of those things. And beyond just being in that same portal, that means you can build things like Azure Resource Manager templates. The audit logs of all of those operations you do are in that same place inside Azure. You can use Visual Studio add-ins that we have to build out those templates alongside all of your other things, deploy them, use Azure DevOps for continuous integration and continuous deployment. So really with Logic Apps, our goal has been to create an awesome workflow engine that developers can use. Now, when we think about Microsoft Flow, the pivot there is it's really targeting the people in the lines of business, the people in IT who aren't going to be a developer every day. They're not going to be opening up the Azure portal as a part of their normal day job. So what they need is a place that they can go to build these workflows without that cognitive load of dealing with all of those different Azure concepts that are there that are really powerful for developers, but that the general, the guy just sitting in IT or in a line of business that just wants to build an approval process, they don't have to worry about any of those other things. So that's the big difference between the two.
So the birthplace wasn't really in or tell me if it was or it wasn't, but how does that integrate with the CDS story? Is it really just a range of technologies coming together to form the Power Platform that were kind of independently developed, and now you're moving into a model where it's becoming much more cohesive? What's the story there?
Yeah, it definitely started a bit more fragmented. So when we think about the Common Data Service and the Power Platform, in the Power Platform, really you have Power BI, Power Apps, Flow, and the Common Data Service. And when we talk about Power Apps and CDS, for example, there's actually kind of two lineages of technology that have ended up there. On one hand, you have with Power Apps kind of those canvas-based apps, and that originally came, I think it was 2013 or so. There was something called Project Sienna.
Yep, that's right.
That ultimately became those canvas-based Power Apps. And then on the flip side, you have all of the things which, internally we refer to as XRM. That was never really an official brand, but we had all those pieces come in. And what we realized not too long ago now was that all these technologies they're about solving the same core business problems, which is I need to be able to build out business applications. I need to be able to build out workflows that are customizable by people who aren't developers, but still have rich extensibility. So we said, hey, there's all these different technologies that are targeting the same people. Let's bring this together into a single suite. So the truth on the ground has been that, Canvas apps are very different from model apps, and, business process flows are very different from the kind of the automated flows that we have. But we've been doing a lot of work over the past 6 months and longer to bring these things together. So it's not just, we put a label on it and we call it all Power Apps, we call it all Flow, but it's still very different underneath. The things that we're doing now are about really making it so that way I can, for example, I can take a solution now that contains entities inside of CDS, that contains workflows built on CDS, as well as modern flows that are built on Microsoft Flow and Canvas apps and model-driven apps. I can package all that together. I can push that to App Source. I can, move that between my dev, test, prod environments as a single unit. Yeah. So that's something we've really been working on, is bringing what, you're right, started out as very different technologies, but making it so that way they can all work together.
Awesome. In your build presentation earlier this year, you said, and I quote, "In the fullness of time, flows will replace the native workflow engine in Dynamics and SharePoint." And that's brilliant. So we know that, the traditional workflow engines are built on Windows Workflow Foundation. Is that kind of going away so I'm talking about Windows Workflow Foundation here. Is that, what are your thoughts there?
So I think you're absolutely right to identify that, there are several services that we have built on DubF that we're kind of absorbing into Flow. And I think one of the reasons why we're doing that is DubF was never really designed to be a multi-tenant cloud-based service that is highly scalable to, many billions of transactions a day. That I think took us a little while to realize. When we started with Dynamics Workflow, it was part of an on-premises product where it made a lot of sense. Same thing with SharePoint. That was a on-premises product, and having DubF there as an engine that doesn't really need to worry too much about multi-tenancy and scale and cloud availability, that it was absolutely the right technology choice at the time. But as all of these things have moved to the cloud, we've realized that from a scalability, from a performance, from a reliability point of view, DubF just doesn't meet those requirements. Yeah. So in terms of, will DubF stay around? I think the answer to that is yes. I mean, we're not getting rid of DubF as a library that if you just want to go build the .NET service, you can totally use .NET or DubF for yourself and build something out, just for the purposes of that .NET application that you're building. So that's not, to the best of my knowledge, that's not going away anytime soon. But in terms of these managed SaaSes that we have, and platform, Logic Apps kind of as a PaaS, those aren't going to be using DubF as an underlying technology. Yeah, makes sense. So what's the biggest challenge to achieving, if you like, the move ultimately, I would assume, off the old technology? Yeah, so a lot of the work that we have in flight is already going to address these things. So the solution work that I mentioned, that's one of the big things is just making it part of the ecosystem. I mean, it's a lot more than solutions. It's also things like permissions are now fully managed inside of the CDS instance, and so a bunch of that we just shipped back in November. I think that will help. But what we're working on right now is making, when a flow runs, it executes kind of natively against the APIs of the CDS. So that means that there's not going to be today, as I'm sure you're familiar with, we have these connectors that are kind of intermediaries, right, between the flow service and that backing API. And for Dynamics and the Dynamics applications and CDS applications, our goal is to eliminate that intermediary, so that way Flow can natively integrate directly into the common data service. So this is kind of the next big chunk that we're working on. And once we do that, we think we're really going to be at a place where the vast majority of gaps between the existing modern flows as well as the legacy CDS-based workflows, those are going to be closed. And there will still be, a tail of, a few other features here or there that we got to close out. But I think really this biggest challenge is this native integration work that we're doing.
So does workflow assemblies go away in time then? Yeah.
The goal is that you still can build out kind of custom actions in a way that you can use them inside of the common data service. So we're still working through exactly how are we going to carry forward the investments that people have. And, we're definitely not going to be at a place where, on January 1st, 2020, we're going to break all of this existing stuff. We're not going to do that. But I think we are going to move to a world where we have, slightly different approaches for people to develop, programmatic extensions to what flows can do. So that will evolve over time, but at the same time, we're not going to just break anything that's there today.
No. And that's, one of the things Microsoft does consistently. So what about, when do you think, when do you think you'll get this all wrapped up? In other words, be at a point where not necessarily the historical legacy stuff has moved across, but really anything building from this point forward, you would know that you're kind of, it's on the new stuff, not the legacy.
Yeah, so I'm feeling really good about the first half of 2019. Our goal is that every key scenario, all of these, these gaps, the native work that I was talking about, of talking directly into the CDS APIs, all of that's going to be completed in the first half of 2019.
Nice.
So at that point, there still may be a few things here or there that aren't, at full parity, but at that point, there's really no reason why people shouldn't be building workflows on top of Microsoft Flow. And really, we're already at a place today where I would recommend people to start evaluating that. With the solution work that we shipped back in November, that's really kind of one of the biggest blockers that people had. Now you can package, you can move. So I think that starting back in November, maybe through the first half of 2019, that's when the real transition period is.
Right. So very technical, a lot of moving parts here code-wise, but I find this quote that I found quite interesting. It said, "I believe that there is not a single user interface that cannot be improved. My passion is to identify and execute on such improvements." So you obviously have quite a bent for the whole user experience and design, which I find, fantastic. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So when I mentioned that I used to work on some open source projects and mostly before I joined Microsoft, not because we don't love open source here, but just like in terms of time, I just don't have any time anymore. But, a lot of the reasons I would do that is I would be looking at, at a program or something and be like, this is just really hard to use. I just really want to make this better. And anybody who looks at the existing workflow technology that Microsoft has and doesn't in some way feel that this thing needs to feel dramatically better, I think probably hasn't used the product enough. So I think for me, what's exciting is this is a really big space. I mean, with Microsoft Flow, we've definitely started, relatively small, I would say. We're focused, primarily on those types of scenarios we do today with Dynamics workflow and with SharePoint workflow. And, obviously we are more than that, but that's definitely our starting spot. But if you think broader, I mean, what we've done, for example, by bringing business process flows into Microsoft Flow is, that's really business process management is now, basic business process management is now possible. And you look at the market, there's a lot of things going on with integration and AI and RPA. And, there's a bunch of stuff here where there's all of this legacy software. And I think coming at it with a fresh pair of eyes and really thinking about how can we really solve the core problems that users face here, that's something that really, really excites me and that personally I'm very passionate about.
Awesome. Can you give me an example of how you personally use Flow to get things done?
Sure. So I'll describe two examples. One, in just personal productivity, I created a flow that whenever I send an email to somebody else that is of high importance, if nobody responds on that thread within 30 minutes, it sends me a notification to maybe check in on the thread and send out another reminder. So that's something I just use because if I send something that's high importance, I want to make sure that's being looked at. Yeah. That's a very simple flow that I use pretty frequently, not very complicated. On the other side, we at Microsoft inside the business application group, we have this new release notes process. I don't know if you're very familiar with it, but in April and in October, we released these big release notes, and kind of maintaining those release notes. We actually, and most teams still do this, do it a lot by hand. Like there's a repository where these things are, the program managers on the team, they go in and make updates, and there's like tables of contents that need to be updated and list of features, and keeping all of these things in sync is, actually it's a lot of manual work that people are doing. So what I've done is I've actually built out a bunch of flows that look at a CDS database that we log all of our features in CDS instead. And then in the release notes, all of those tables of contents and, when features are available and all those things are just automatically generated from that CDS database. So historically, it would be up to, me as the kind of the GPM for Flow to stitch all this stuff together by hand. But now I just have a flow do it for me. And it's a really great way to take something which would have been a ton of manual work. And now I just hit a button and bam, I have all of the release notes generated in that repository that then show up on the release notes website.
Wow, brilliant. Do you think at some point we'd be able to consider Flow like an enterprise business process management engine? Like it'll be
definitely.
It would have kind of the robustness of, pausing routines, picking them up again, or relaying new processes over the top and having them carry on from their existent state, that type of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So today we have, a lot of investments that we've already done in terms of reliability and robustness and those types of things. As we get to closing some of those gaps with Dynamics workflow in terms of what they have, where, with Dynamics workflow, you can actually resume a failed flow from a particular place. So as we close those gaps, we're going to be, meeting a lot of those requirements that exist for those enterprise business process management scenarios. Plus, we're investing in the business process flows themselves, right? And linking those up more closely with the automated flows that we have. So I think, today we actually have a pretty solid foundation where people can definitely build, robust enterprise processes on Flow today. And we have even more things coming in the not too distant future, really in the first half of 2019, that will really make this even better.
So what about the scenario of I create a flow, let's say version 1, and then 2 years time, the business needs change, but that flow is still operating, let's say on 1 million different data sets. Could I create version 1.2 or version 2 even, and overlay that over the existing flow in flight? Do you think we'll get to that point?
So I think there's an interesting challenge there where if you have a lot of long-running flows, you may want to potentially break that up into smaller subroutines that can be executed, in a more kind of time-constrained fashion. So if we think about like a business process flow, for example, a business process flow that could take a day or it could take a year or 10 years even, right? And it's broken up so that way the stages are there and well-defined. And on state transitions, you have those workflows that go and execute. So if we kind of apply that model, the nice thing about business process flows is it's very easy to change kind of the stage layout, even for executing things, because kind of what your traverse path is, how you got to where you are in the business process flow. With a automated flow, that's really about kind of an atomic bit of work of going and executing based on my criteria. I'm going to go and run a series of steps. So for the automated flows, it definitely is much more of a challenge to, in the middle of execution, change something that's in flight in a kind of a reliable way, because there's already assumptions built in about, what is already executed, what is the state of my system before. So I think, with things like the ability to pause and resume, we're definitely gonna get closer. How long it is until I could go and say, update 1 million in-flight runs, I don't know exactly, when we would get to that, but I would just say for that, maybe modeling it as, multiple flows chained together might be a better way to accomplish that scenario than having 1 million different kind of long-running flows, which are more difficult to maintain.
Yeah. You mentioned BPF, they're a business process flow. So under your remit now, does everything like business process flow, any of the logic or business rules, that type of thing, does that now all come under your remit?
Yeah, that's right. So everything related to flows, business process flows, workflows, process actions, all of that is now kind of part of the broader Microsoft Flow team. So our goal really is to provide that kind of seamless workflow layer, no matter kind of how it's manifesting for end users. So that's definitely something that we're looking at. And as a part of that, we're bringing a lot more consistency to it. So I don't know if you've seen recently, but we actually updated the business process flow designer to look and feel a lot closer to the way that the automated flows work. So we're doing things to kind of bring them closer together, so that way it's easier to kind of take and transfer your skills from building one to the other and back again.
Nice. So, back to that UI question, are you involved right up at the user experience layer and the user interface layer of how, I feel like particularly business process flows, right? They're one of the things that are right in the interface and the experience, when a lot of flows, once executed, if you like, behind the curtain. So, how does that affect your thinking when it's up at if you like, at the interface level?
Yeah, I'm definitely involved at that layer, and we actually have a really great team that goes and designs as well as tests a lot of our experiences. So we have individuals on the team that will go and develop a functional description of how a given feature should work. Taking business process flows. We're doing improvements to business process flows right now. Actually, I was just in a meeting before this meeting talking about this. And we're taking these improvements, and so what we do is, we have somebody design kind of the functional approach that gets reviewed by myself and everybody on the team, and then we have designers that go and turn that into a prototype that we then put in front of some users to get their feedback, make sure that it really meets those requirements that they may have, and that somebody who just sits in front of it in 5 minutes can actually walk through it. And until those users are confident with the experience that we built, we're not going to ship that. So we will keep iterating on it and making sure that people can really use this experience. And at that point, then we'll make it available to the rest of the world. And everybody on the team is involved in that process to make sure that the experiences that we deliver are really high quality and that they've been validated. It's not just Microsoft employees that think it's awesome. We want to really get that feedback to ensure that it meets all of the requirements anybody may have.
Nice. So how big a deal, or how big do you think Flow is going to get, let's say 2 years down the track, as in from people and their careers, and from the point of view of, that let's say they're in the dynamic space traditionally, they've used to the tooling that we've had there. Now we've moved into Flow. How important is that these folks really start investing, getting up to speed, understanding Flow, and as you say, almost choosing to build things on Flow because it's going to persist and be around a long time, as opposed to doing things the old way?
It's a big deal. I would say that with Flow, this is really where all of the investment is going in terms of anything that's automated behaviors, anything that's about business process management, and that applies across both dynamics, right, for people who have historically worked from dynamics, but also all of the Office pieces that are out there. We're working with a bunch of different Office teams. Recently we did more integration to Microsoft Teams. We have more integrations coming in OneDrive. So really anybody who is, finding themselves building out processes for their organization, it's going to be Flow. And that's across all of the Microsoft services that are out there. And we even have integrations, of course, with third parties through connectors. So if you're out there and you're using a third-party service that Microsoft hasn't built, you can actually use Flow. You don't have to use any Microsoft services with Flow. Now, obviously, we prefer that you do because we think that we've delivered really great high-quality services, but there's no requirement that you need to. So really kind of across the whole market, I'd say there's a lot of opportunity to learn about Flow, to build, you can build a practice on top of Flow. We have lots of partners that are really building out Flow as a part of their practices. So it's a lot of opportunity.
So that moves in then to the ISV discussion. Do you see there's an opportunity for ISVs to innovate really solely on Flow? Let's not touch Power Apps as such, but really whether those are connectors or other things, maybe even specific processes designed for industry verticals. What's the opportunity from an ISV's perspective?
So there definitely is an opportunity from a connector point of view. We're always working with more and more ISVs for building out connectors and just really enhancing the set of things that Flow can connect to. We also support embedding Flow into other applications. So we do this today in Microsoft. If you're in SharePoint or Teams or whatever, we actually have that Flow experience embedded. And that embedding capability, that's not private. We actually have it all publicly documented. So an ISV today, if you wanted to just include Flow capabilities right as part of your application, you could actually do that right now. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And then, you mentioned industry verticals. I think one of the other things we have with Flow is the ability to submit templates. And you can submit templates that meet any particular business need. And, a lot of templates that are out there, they're kind of, more starter, help people get up and running. But there are some templates that are, a lot more advanced and do things that may be more specific to a particular vertical. So there's definitely opportunity for ISVs and partners to get their name out there by building out templates on top of Flow.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So do you see an opportunity where I could create a connector that connected between CDS and Google Ads as an example? Would that be something that could be turned into an ISV solution?
So, it's definitely possible for anybody to go and build that connector. But generally, when we talk about who we're comfortable publishing a connector from inside of the connector gallery that we have, generally we want it to be from the ISV that owns that backing API.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah, so if you're an ISV and you own, a paycheck service or something, then you could definitely integrate with Flow and build that connector. But if you want to go build a Google Ads connector, ideally that would be Google that does that because they own their API surface. They can, make sure that they're doing the right things. There's no kind of third-party agreements that have to happen because whenever you use an API, you got to agree to certain terms. So that's generally our approach as it stands today.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. I thought that would be the case, that you needed to be either on the Microsoft side of the equation or the connecting parties side of the equation.
Yep,
Can you tell me
right.
about connectors and where you see them fitting in the picture? You've got 200 plus at the moment. You know, realistically, what are you seeing that scale up to? Are you seeing 10s, 20s, 30s being added, you know, a quarter of additional connectors? What's the demand for there?
Yeah, so I'd say those numbers, it is actually generally in that range, 10 to say 30 connectors added in a quarter.
Yep.
And we've been moving along with that pace pretty quickly. So I think that'll continue to grow. And our hope is that as more and more people learn about Flow, that pace only increases.
Nice, nice. What excites you most about the opportunity provided by Flow for Business?
I mean, I'm just really excited about the way that it empowers individuals to improve their own productivity and their own process and their own business. Historically, these tools that we've had have been really hard for people to use. And oftentimes they require writing a bunch of code. Most people can't do that. And even the people who can do it, I mean, I can write code. I mean, the code that I write is not very pretty, but I can definitely write code. I'm just imagining like the process I was talking about earlier of, generating our release notes files. It's like, that's, snapping a few things together. It's really easy in Flow. Writing code, I have to maintain that service somewhere. It's just really exciting to me how quickly people can get, their processes done with Flow. It's really great.
Awesome. Awesome. Listen, we're going to go into some quickfire questions now, which are really, not technology necessarily focused. But before we do, is there anything else you want to kind of throw out there regarding Flow?
No, I think you asked all the right questions. Getting to a place where we can really be talking about Flow as the kind of the full replacement for those existing legacy workflow technologies. That's one of the big things we're working on. And, at the same time, we have ongoing innovations in usability and making it easier for people to get started and feeling, more consistent with other Microsoft products. So there's a lot of exciting things that we're doing, but yeah, I think you asked all the right things. Nice.
Okay, let's do some quick fire. What's the one thing you own that you wish you didn't?
I would say that the thing I feel bad the most about owning is I have all these old computers that I just turn on once a year that I just don't know what to do with. It's like, I don't want to throw it out. It works, but every time I get a new PC, I don't get rid of my existing ones. And phones, I have several phones and iPads, and it's just a mess.
I think it's Richard Dickinson. He's got some old, what are they? The original like Palm devices and stuff. He was showing me one day. So he's got some really old tech there. I still have a Apple Performa, like 62 something or another that runs System 8. And I just don't know what to do with it. I can't throw it out. What's the one productivity tool you can't live without?
This is a bit of a cop-out, but I'm going to say the Outlook web app. I live and breathe in email, and the web apps that we have these days for Outlook are actually really great. I don't know if you've seen the new experience for them, but it's really pretty awesome. Agreed. Totally. It's just incredible how all that kind of on-device technology has now moved online, yet still works just as seamlessly and slick on wherever you go. It's brilliant. What new technology will transform the future, in your opinion? I think that all of the work that's going on in AI is really going to kind of fundamentally change the way that humans interact with computers and the value we get out of information technology in the world. Definitely there are some people saying, hey, it's like the next industrial revolution. And I don't know if it's quite that big, but Microsoft is not the only company that thinks this, right? I mean, there's a bunch of organizations out there, and I think I'm not really concerned about Skynet destroying all humans or anything like that. Given what I know about computers and what artificial intelligence actually is, that's not going to happen. But there's still so much that can be learned from it. So I think that AI is definitely the next thing. I look forward to the day where we don't have a keyboard, mouse, or even a screen, but we're fully plugged in. That'll be awesome. Full cyborg. Who do you recommend on the podcast in the future? I don't know if you, I don't know who all you've had on, but definitely like Brian Cunningham and Gautam Sapar. Those are two people who work on the teams inside of the Power Apps and Flow Org. So they definitely should join if they haven't yet.
Awesome. Ryan's on schedule for next week, and I've got to get Gautam on, as you say. That would be awesome. Stephen, it's been fantastic to have you on the show and shed some light on a whole bunch of stuff. Thank you so much. If people want to kind of follow you on the socials, where can they find you?
So on Twitter, I'm ISCSUS. So that's pretty much the only social media I use. I don't use Instagram or whatever the kids these days are doing, but
he doesn't even use
the best way to follow me.
He doesn't even use LinkedIn.
Not as much. Yeah, I got yelled at the other day by the LinkedIn guys. I was meeting with them, and they were not happy. So I need to go back there and update my profile.
Classic. Thanks again, and we'll see you around sometime.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was great talking with you.
Thanks for listening. We'd love to get your thoughts and ideas for Flow. Please, if you enjoyed the show, can you please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes? nz365guy.com/iTunes is where you can do that. I'll appreciate it. For full show notes or discuss anything covered in the show, please go to nz365guy.com/60. Bye for now.